We'll call this regular meeting of council to order for Monday, March 10th, 2014. I'll ask council to consider the adoption of the agenda. The recommendation is that the agenda for the regular council meeting of March 10th, 2014 be adopted as circulated, but in this case it'll be with the deletion of item number 6A. Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Carlick-Pearson, seconded by Councillor Kinney. Is there any discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. The agenda is adopted with the deletion of item 6A. For council's consideration, there's minutes, 2 sets to be adopted, 3 to be received. The first set are the minutes of the special council meeting of February 24th, 2014. The recommendation is that they be adopted. Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Kinney. Is there any discussion, any errors or omissions? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Those minutes are adopted. Next for council's consideration are the minutes from the regular council meeting of February 24th, 2014. The recommendation is that they be adopted. Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Are there any errors or omissions? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Those minutes are adopted. The last set of minutes are the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of February 24th, 2014. The recommendation is that those committee minutes be received. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Is there any discussion or errors or omissions? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Those minutes are received. We'll move on to item 4, petitions and delegations. Tonight there's a presentation, and this is regarding the Northwest Readiness Project, and it's through the Ministry of Community Sport and Cultural Development, and it's an update on the Northwest Readiness Project. Good evening, Grant. If you'd come forward, please. Make yourself comfortable in one of the chairs there. When you're ready to speak, there's be a grayish-green button to your eye, and you'll press that, and people that are watching at home via TV or, I believe, streaming will be able to pick you up. Thanks for coming down here.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Grant Lockmuth. I'm the Executive Director of the Northwest Readiness Project. I'm here today representing the Ministry of Community Sport and Cultural Development and responding to an invitation from Mayor and Council to provide an update on the Northwest Readiness Project to yourselves and to the community of Prince Rupert. The Northwest Readiness Project has an objective, which is to ensure that the communities and the provincial service providers in the Northwest, namely Prince Rupert, Port Ed, Terrace, Kitimat, and the 2 regional districts of Kitimat, Stikine, and Skeena, Queen Charlotte, are prepared for what we expect to be a very large economic development, with a number of major projects coming to the Northwest area here over the next several years. So with that, our objective is to work with the communities, with our project team, and help the community with your service provision for that growth and development. And I'm also working with a core group of provincial ministries who are also delivering services and providing services in and around your communities to assist them in their preparations and what they may need to make as far as adjustments or enhancements to their services that they provide as provincial ministries. And if you like, at some point I can provide you that list of ministries if you so wish. So in undertaking this project, I started with this project in early December of 2013, and with that, myself and the executive lead for the project, which is Shanna Mason, who's the Assistant Deputy Minister for the Ministry of Jobs, Tourism and Skills Training, we reached out to the communities to talk with the representatives in each of the communities, primarily the CAOs in the regional districts and the administrators in the two regional districts. So in this municipality, we spoke with your city manager, Bob Long, and members of his staff, and wanted to get a view of what some of the pressures were that the municipality may be experiencing with the discussions and contacts from a number of the major project proponents, as word of LNG projects and energy projects and the likes are being discussed and in various stages of review, and prior to any final investment decisions being made by those groups. We know that communities in preparation for large development, and that it's always very helpful in you making your decisions on what adjustments to services that you may need to make. You may wish to revisit your official community plan, make sure that it's fully updated in regards to housing, zoning bylaws. You may want to look at your asset infrastructure inventories that you have and what you have for roads, water, sewer, utility services that may see pressure with these developments coming, both in the construction phase with the various worker camps that are proposed, and then also post-construction with the full-time resident employees that are envisioned to come with these developments. So when we reached out and talked to the various community representatives throughout the Northwest, we heard from many of them that, from a resource perspective and capacity perspective, some municipalities and regional districts were under-resourced and were looking for additional resources to help with those updating of their official community plans, and also with the asset infrastructure inventories. Also, we heard from the communities as we talked to them that they were experiencing a large number of referral submissions that they were receiving in their planning departments from proponents, developers, and the likes, both through the environmental assessment processes and just from development proposals that are being seen in some of the communities. And that number of referral submissions and technical documents was also putting a level of pressure on the planning departments in the various municipalities and also in those regional districts here throughout the Northwest. So as part of our project, we've been undertaking several key measures to provide some assistance to the communities and to the regional districts. One is with the OCPs and the asset infrastructure inventories for those communities that need assistance. We have negotiated an agreement with Northern Development Initiative Trust on behalf of the province of BC that will provide a number of planning interns, which are graduates from the University of Northern BC planning program, out to the communities to provide direct assistance, some boots on the ground assistance for the folks here in the communities to help with those OCP and asset infrastructure inventories. So with that...
Is that paid interns?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's paid interns. It's a joint partnership between Northern Development Initiative Trust and the province of BC through the Ministry of Community, Sport and Cultural Development. So those interns will be provided out to the communities that wish help from them to assist with that OCP and asset infrastructure inventory work or other works that may contribute to enhancing and preparing the municipality for service provision for the future with these upcoming major developments. So we know that these young interns, and we're looking at 4 to 6 interns here for the Northwest, that they've recently graduated and they've done a great job of coming out of university, but they don't necessarily have that boots on the ground experience. So with that, the province of BC will be providing 2 certified planners from within the provincial government who will act as mentor and sponsor to those planning interns to oversee the work that they're providing for the communities, that it's work of value that's contributing to your planning works here for the future, and will ensure that that work then is documented for those interns as their candidates within the Planning Institute of BC's certification program. Our hope and our intent is that these planning interns that have been educated within the North and the Northwest will come out here and work on assignments. And this is a 2-year agreement that we've negotiated with Northern Development, that when they work in the North and the Northwest, that they become registered certified planners, and they hopefully will become your future planners here within the Northwest upon reaching that accreditation. So that's one level of assistance that we're providing. We've signed that agreement several days ago. We are in the process of, we have already interviewed and are signing employment agreements with those planning interns through Northern Development. It will be their program, and I know that they have reached out to most of the communities already to discuss that program. Secondly, though, we also have heard from the communities that about the number of referral submissions and technical documents that are being received in the communities, and the sheer backlog of those submissions and the number of them being received. We know that some communities are prepared better than others, have more planning staff available and able to deal with those submissions. However, we have heard from a number of communities and regional districts that they would like some assistance to help with that backlog of submissions. So with that, the second part of the agreement that we've negotiated with Northern Development Initiative Trust is to provide a community industry liaison individual who will be available to help communities with taking those technical submissions that you've received and undertake a process of distilling or synthesizing those technical submissions into executive summary form to then hand back to the community for your review. Now, this synthesizing of this document, the individual will not be providing any comments or recommendations. It's purely a technical process to assist with making that document into a condensed form that is easier then for the respective councils and boards to take that document, determine its relevancy to your community, and determine your response, if needed, to that submission. So again, it's a service to provide to the community, and that position will be funded between Northern Development Initiative Trust and the province of BC.
Does it include such things as environmental assessments?
It could review those and synthesize them down. Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Councillor Ashley.
I'm just wondering if that's just one position for the entire North, or is that like kind of one per large community?
It's one.
You'll have to turn your mic on again.
Sorry, it may be several positions. We've funded a program to provide services in that area. It will be based on demand that we receive from the various communities, and we're working with the communities now to determine what level of resource they may or may not want in that regard.
Please go ahead.
My other question was just regarding the planners. Just as there's so much information, I wanted to ask the question while it's timely. With the planners that you're talking about, have those been assigned to communities already, or is that something that our staff has to apply for?
Members of Northern Development Initiative Trust have been in contact with each of the municipalities and the regional districts to talk about what level of resource each community may want. So those discussions are already underway, and that will determine. Our intent is that those planning interns, at least for the first 6 to 8 months of the program, will be brought out and situated in the communities and be here to provide services on a daily basis, either within your offices or shared between several offices.
Well, thank you. I appreciate hearing that. We've got a relatively new city manager here, and he needs all the help he can get. Please go ahead.
Great. Thank you very much. We, as part of our program for the Northwest Readiness Project, we know, though, that for any community to look at updating their OCPs, for updating their asset infrastructure inventories, they need to have a reasonable picture of what development is coming and on what timeline, what magnitude of development it will bring in regards to numbers of construction workers during the 3 to 4 year construction phase of the individual project, and then what number of post-construction full-time workers may be expected to be part of that development and resident in your community. So with that, we've been working very closely with the various levels of government. We've been working with the various proponents themselves to draw together all of that information on what they expect to have for numbers of construction workers, camp populations, number of full-time workers, should their final investment decisions be made and should those major projects go forward.
Councillor Ashley.
Just a question on that. So I do appreciate all of the work that's being done. One of the questions that's kind of come forward, because there's several different groups that are looking at, potentially investing. So we could end up with 3 or 4, we could end up with 1, we could end up with none. So the question would be, looking at all of the short-term, long-term kind of impacts and all of the things that you're looking at, are you guys looking at it as if one project's going in, or is it both one and also what cumulative effects would be?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. We're actually looking at all of that. We're putting together population growth analysis and demand forecast that look at all of the developments that could go ahead, and then we look at the likelihood of which projects are currently advanced, which ones are currently in preliminary environmental assessment processes. So we're preparing multiple scenarios of what growth or development could come to each community, and then we're putting forward what we think is the most likely scenario that we anticipate over the next 3 to 5 years, and then on the 10-year cycle of what will come to the area. And that's based on looking at all of the projects out there and where they're currently at in their state of progress, and of course subject to their final investment decisions. So we've currently prepared draft forecasts for what we're calling the 2 sub-regions of the Skeena, Queen Charlotte area, and then Kitimat, Stikine area, looking at the 2 sub-regions within the Northwest. And then we're breaking the report down into a community-by-community basis, again with population growth analysis, demand forecasts, and then the scenarios that we're developing to suggest what we think will come with the developments and when. We are going to look to share those population growth analysis with your community representatives, with your city manager here, probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks. And we're looking then for feedback from the community based on the projections that we put forward, because we're putting forward population growth analysis that represents not only the populations expected from the construction workers during that construction phase and post-construction, but also utilizing a form of multiplier in those population growth analysis to represent the secondary businesses that we expect will also come with the growth and development here in the Northwest. So we want to present that to you. Get your review and your consensus that the numbers and the scenarios that we're putting forward are reasonable, and that same information, same population growth analysis and demand forecast will also be provided to those provincial ministry service providers who are providing services in and around your community, so that both the community, the provincial ministries, the respective agencies, be that Northern Health, Prince Rupert Port Authority, are all utilizing the same baseline set of assumptions on what growth and development we expect to be coming to the Northwest region and to your community in and around Prince Rupert.
Councillor Thurkelson.
Did you do any analysis of impacts in the possible impacts on the community based on camp spending in town, or and so if your camp is located close to town or completely isolated from town, have you done that kind of an impact analysis? I know that was a big debate in Kitimat, whether you have everybody outside of town or whether you bring them into town. Certainly a debate in Dawson City or Dawson Creek, and so I was wondering, have you done that kind of analysis?
We haven't done and aren't doing a specific spending analysis, but we are looking at the specific camp locations, whether or not those camps will be deemed closed camps or open camps, whether or not those camps are going to have certain services provided for the workers at those camps, be it healthcare, security, policing, laundry services, restaurant services, things of that nature, because that will determine whether or not those camps are more or less self-contained, or whether or not there will be significantly more movement of workers between the camps and the local community, during the construction phase. We're also looking at the post-construction phase, at the number of workers that the proponents are indicating that they will have for each of those major projects, and we're putting together scenarios on what we think, what portion of those full-time workers will be resident in the communities, and we hope that's all of them. However, there may be a portion that are the shadow population, the fly-in, fly-out, and we're including that in the scenarios that we're developing and what we'll be presenting to your community.
Councillor Ashley.
I know that part of the scope of the project is to identify the needs, immediate and long-term, of the community, which I think is great. What I'm wondering, is part of the scope of this also to make recommendations to the provincial government as to how, as to what those, like the infrastructure funding needs are, and whether or not, like what kind of money might be needed in order to fund the immediate and long-term impacts?
I think that may be an outcome of this project as we move forward with the involvement of approximately 12 ministries who are involved in this Northwest Readiness Project. They're each looking at the services that they're providing in and around your community, be it transportation or education or social development and Ministry of Children and Families. BC Housing. They'll be looking at what improvements or enhancements they need to make to your community, and each of those ministries will be engaging with your community in the works that they're undertaking and they're proposing to put forward as they develop their capital funding programs to anticipate and ensure that the services they provide are adequate in your community as well.
Councillor Cunningham.
That's fine about the ministries, that funding should be coming, but I'm looking at abstract funding, our policing, things like that, like stuff the city pays for. Are we going to be getting any help from the province? Like the province has probably just picked up $50 million on Grassy Point alone, and I see that you're being very generous in giving us $150,000 for all the northern communities together. We could eat that up ourselves and still not have enough money for the planning stages alone.
The $150,000 that you refer to, that was the $150,000 that was committed to from the Premier at the UBCM convention last fall as initial money for the commencement of this project. That is not represented to be whatever funding discussions occur between the municipality and the province in the future. Looking at policing is not a specific outcome of this project. This project may identify that enhancements to policing and other services need to be made, but those discussions will occur between the respective ministry of the province and yourselves to go forward and have those discussions and determine what, if any, sharing in services needs to be made.
Councillor Ashley.
So just because I know that part of this is meeting with us and asking us what our needs are, and immediate and long term. So I'm sure I won't be speaking out of turn for anybody for putting this into the report, and I don't think it's probably something that you haven't heard before. But the fact is that whether it's planning, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's policing, which I know is outside of the scope of the report, one of the immediate and long-term needs of our community is more money, because we simply cannot afford to do all of the things. Now, I think lots of the things that you've been saying have been good. Trying to help us with the planning by providing people, all of those things are good. But the fact is, even with that additional help, There are so many things that we are having to deal with just on an infrastructure basis alone. I'm not sure how much you know about our community, but, and please other people correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we have like $100 million infrastructure deficit in our community. And we don't have the money to deal with that. We also have water, sewer treatment plants we need to look, that's going to be looking at another 100 million. So while I know that's outside the scope of this, the fact that is not outside the scope is that whatever needs we have, we're going to need some assistance money-wise to help with that.
Great, thank you. And certainly you're very much correct. As I mentioned at the start of my presentation, the Northwest Readiness Project is about helping you get to that state of determining what improvements or enhancements you may need to make to your infrastructure, be it roads or housing or policing or other social services. It's to get that preparedness in place so then you can have those meaningful discussions between the different levels of government that say, based on this information of population growth analysis, demand forecasts, this is what we all agree between the municipality, the regional districts, and the province of what's coming with this development. Here's now, upon undertaking our OCP update and our asset infrastructure update, here's what we feel we're going to need for enhancements to our infrastructure. And then that will leave you at the next level with the province of engaging in those discussions. So that will be the outcome of this project, to prepare you for that state. But this project won't carry through and be leading those discussions between yourselves and the province.
Councillor Thorkelson.
So how do we engage with the provincial government? Like at what stage? I understand what you're doing is you're giving us the tools with which to engage the provincial government. What do we do? When do we start doing that? What's the process? Is there a process set up? Should we phone the minister and get on the list so that we're first? Or how does this work?
Great. Thank you very much for the question. The intent is once we have brought out the population growth analysis and the demand forecasts and the scenarios that we think is, the baseline set of assumptions of what major projects and development is coming to this area, in providing it to yourselves and to those provincial ministries, then I'm looking at in mid to late spring of bringing then the community representatives and the provincial ministry representatives together to have those very meaningful discussions that, based on that set of assumptions of what's coming, what improvements to services do you anticipate you're making, or improvements to infrastructure that you believe you're going to need to deal with the growth and development for the future, and share that with the provincial ministries, have those provincial ministries share with you that, again, based on those baseline assumptions, what adjustments they feel they need to make to their infrastructure and the services they provide in your communities, and have that as the initiation of that meaningful discussion that needs to occur between your community and the provincial ministries and the senior government officials as we move forward.
Councillor Kinney.
Thank you, Your Worship. Grant, those that are not within the scope of the project, as you said, like, for example, policing, what about the hospitals and stuff? Now, do these people bring their own medical people? Or are we going to have to?
Sure.
Councillor, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Certainly, part of the project so far, I've been in meaningful discussions with Northern Health, with Penny Anguish and Dr. Jeff Appleton there regarding the health needs as they see it there through the Northern Health Authority. Also, I've been in discussions with some of the proponents themselves. Some of those proponents are, looking at different scenarios for their camps. Some are looking at providing, primary care facilities in their camps, and others aren't. So as we move forward, those will be part of the meaningful discussions that we have through this project, with the proponents. Northern Health is involved in this project as well, and they'll be looking at what improvements, enhancements they need to make to the Northern Health Services that they provide throughout the Northwest as well. So again, this is the initiation of that process to look at all of those things and what may be needed. And I expect, based on my discussions with some of the proponents so far, that there is going to be significant differences in each community. But that means we need to have those local meaningful conversations there between the community, the proponents, and the province as we move forward.
Thank you. Councillor Thurkelson.
I just wanted to make it clear. It says that policing is covered in this scope, right? That we're talking about policing.
No.
I think it says community level services provided directly by or within the scope: health services, housing, policing, social services. And then community level services provided by non-government entities funded by provincial agencies and are within the scope, and aren't within the scope are local government services other than those provided by a mix of local provincial funding arrangements, policing and hospitals, which are provided by dual funding arrangements. So policing is covered, correct?
Yeah, policing will be looked at through the project. However, policing is typically based on the community. Some of it may be provided by the community, may be provided by the province. So we'll look at that. We believe that the population growth analysis, those demand forecasts, will be that critical piece of information that will, between yourselves and the province, will have you look at what the policing needs reasonably will be in each community. Again, based on whether or not the proponents and their camp operations have their own security, have their own policing or not, and what may be needed on a community by community basis individually here.
Sure. I just wanted to follow up on that. I think Kitimat, my understanding is that Kitimat has seen an increase in growth of the drug trade, is that the Vancouver dealers have moved in and moved out the local dealers, and there's been some concern between that. Is that, have you been looking at those kinds of experience? Because that would seem to me you need either increased policing or a different kind of policing than the kind of community policing we may have here.
No, we haven't been looking at that. That's not something that's been brought to our attention whatsoever in our discussions with District of Kitimat. It has been mentioned by District of Kitimat representatives that they have added one additional RCMP officer to their detachment there, but they've raised no issues with us in regards to what you referred to.
Councillor Cunningham.
The one officer that was added in Kitimat, did that come out of the taxpayers' pocket from Kitimat?
I'm not sure how that was funded. They didn't mention to me how that came about, only that there had been that addition made apparently. But I have that as second-hand information, so that would have to be verified with District of Kitimat.
See, the way I look at it, if you put a camp of 4,000 men in Port Ed, a lot of them are going to be coming to Rupert. It's going to cost us extra policing, definitely. There's going to be lots of side issues. We're definitely going to need more police. Now, you can either take up from our pocket or bring in regional policing like they have, like they've taken the traffic division, moved it to Terrace right now. They've taken our regional drug division and moved it to Prince George. These are extra police that we had in our community at one point, and now they're moved out of it. Now, I would think, because that's a provincial type of policing, regional, that they would be moved back into a place like this if we need them.
I would expect that as we move forward with bringing the community and the provincial service providers together and have had an opportunity to review those population growth analysis and the specific camp operations in the community, that will give everyone more meaningful information, reliable information to look at, and then have those discussions there together on what additions or enhancements to services may be made at that point. At this point in time, I'm not able to provide any meaningful comment on that.
Well, we're only 10 months away from the final investment decision on Petronas. Once that decision's made in December, we know what's going to happen. We don't have to wait for the camp to be built to know we're going to have a problem.
Yeah, and we'll be engaging with the proponents themselves, and certainly the proponents have talked about many issues that they've heard about from their engagement with the community representatives as well, around housing and other issues. So I know that they're very concerned about those impacts as well that need to be discussed as we go forward.
Councillor Ashley.
Will there be any opportunity? I know right now you're talking with us. I'm wondering if there might be any opportunity to have a meeting with us, you, and then perhaps some of the proponents so that we're kind of all at the table talking about this stuff together.
Yeah, I have talked with a number of proponents through this project, and they have expressed interest and a desire to meet with the community representatives and have the kind of discussions that they need to with you. And I'm sure that, with that, there will be much discussion around, camp operations and implications of those camp operations in and around the community. So certainly as I go forward with this project and engage with those proponents, I can strongly encourage that. They've also indicated to me that through this project they would like to utilize the contacts that we develop through this project so that they can reach out and engage with you in the discussions that they need to have as they're moving forward with their development.
Councillor Ashley.
Yeah, and I do understand that, and I appreciate that you're encouraging them to talk with us, and that is something we've been doing. But I guess what I'm wondering is you and whoever is working with you on this project are the ones that are putting forward these things. So I'm just thinking that it probably would be good to be that fly on the wall while we're having that discussion so that you hear some of the other things that come up that sometimes even when we're asking you questions might not come up until we're kind of faced with something with a proponent.
No, absolutely. I very much would like to be part of that and help in any way that I can to bring the proponents, yourselves, and the provincial service providers together, all in one room so that we can have those meaningful discussions. Because when it comes down to, brass tacks of looking at the specific services in the communities, that's where the decisions need to be made, is where everyone is sitting around the table and having the kind of discussions that need to happen here moving forward.
Councillor Thorkelson.
Yes, I want to support what Councillor Ashley is saying. When they talk to us individually, they're very proprietary about their plans, and if they pretend to know nothing about the other proponents' plans, and so that makes it very difficult when you're trying to find out what the synergistic effects are going to be of all of those camps, because they have never met with us, all the proponents at one time. So I mean, I think it'd be nice to meet them with the government agencies. Certainly nice to meet them even without the government agencies to discuss. There's several issues that should be discussed since they're all impacting either our area or the Kitimat area.
Yeah, thank you. And certainly I'd be very happy to help facilitate that and help bring those groups together to have those discussions here as we go forward. I think that very much fits and is aligned with the Northwest Readiness Project and our intent to help facilitate and bring the groups together here.
Thank you. Have you got anything further there, or?
No, that was everything that I had. I think I just wanted to primarily emphasize, what we have worked on and developed to date, what we're working on for the future with the population growth analysis and those forecasts that I'll be sharing out with the community here in the next few weeks. And again, I look for your feedback and comments on those so that we develop a product that everyone has reliance in and confidence in as we move forward between the communities and the provincial service providers, and also, as has been mentioned here, the proponents themselves. So with that, I'd just like to thank Mayor and Council for your invitation, and certainly I'm available at any time if there's any questions by any member of Council regarding the Northwest Readiness Project. I would be more than happy to assist in any way that I can.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming here tonight and answering some of the initial questions from members of Council.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We'll move on to item number 8. Item 6A has been withdrawn. 4B. You're correct. I wonder how I missed that. That's the opportunity for public comment regarding the 2014 five-year financial plan. Perhaps it would help if we have the Chief Financial Officer just give some comments to the public about what a five-year financial plan contains. And then we'll get some comments from the public, of course.
Thank you, Your Worship. The five-year financial plan is required and as defined in the community charter. It is prepared so the community has an idea of what council is proposing to do for the entire 5 years. It's supposed to be a transparent document, and with that there is the opportunity for public consultation, which is provided and has been outlined by council in the last meeting. Today is one of the opportunities for the public to come forward and provide their input for council's deliberation.
Thank you very much. I'll ask people in the gallery if they would like to come forward and take this opportunity for public comment on the 2014 five-year financial plan. Good evening. Your name for the record, please.
For the record, Larry Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Golden. I'll just tell you before you start that this council's long on kindness and short on patience, and if I let you go longer than 5 minutes, you and I could both be in trouble. But please go ahead.
Have you ever seen me go more than 5 minutes for a question? The first, I would like to make a suggestion that we make a web page for the upcoming 2040. I looked for this because this is an excellent document, but you shouldn't have to look all the way down to the agenda package of previous meeting. So if and also along the same lines, I think, so if we had this on a web page saying this hasn't been adapted, this is quick reference, and so it's got really good information on it. The other thing to put on it was what we've got a plan for trying to do things before, and so we've already passed the grants, we've already done this and that. So I don't know, I can't remember if we've already done what capital works and what capital projects will be, what will be purchased and what, but that would be nice to be on that page if we've already done it. You know, was the fire truck already approved? You know,
so you'd like to see something a little bit more descriptive.
I would like to see one page just having this information and ongoing. Once we get to the next meeting, presumably we'll have the full budget before us. But in the meantime, I think it'd be very good to have this. So, okay, the specific questions, and I would get down to the 500,000. It came up. Do we have an extra RCMP officer already, or was this 500,000 from 2013 to 2014? That was just. So do we have have we asked for and obtained an extra RCMP member? It might not be extra, it might be just filling what we didn't have before.
What sometimes happens is we'll get RCMP members here, and because they're directly out of the academy, we don't pay the full cost initially. That may have happened. But Mr. Long, do you have any additional information on that? Please use your microphone.
Basically, there was a new contractual arrangement struck with, I believe, the federal government, and we are directed. Each municipality is directed as to how much we're actually going to have to fund for every single member, and the cost did go up per each member.
So the cost is going up, but we don't have an extra. So we haven't already got an extra.
As at the end of 2013, we were already operating with 30 members. There is a little bit of fluctuation throughout the year when there's transition, when they leave, or when they're deployed, or when they are moving around between detachments. So sometimes we're not at a full 30, other times we are at a full 30, but at the moment we are at full 30.
The other question I'd like to go, and it's just one of my pet peeves, is the airport ferry. I see we're running a $200,000 deficit in just the way it is. It'll come up, so that means the taxpayers. What I didn't like, we borrowed $7 million for the airport, and we increased the rates and everything, but now I don't want it to be on the sly that the taxpayers are actually having to meet a lot of that. So I would hope that the airport ferry, if it would halfway break even as opposed to running a $200,000 deficit, which the taxpayers will have to pick up.
Certainly. How the airport ferry is funded has not been determined yet for this year. Some of what you said has been noted by members of council, and it will be a consideration as to how costs are allocated.
And that's what is this a budget decision, or is this
No, it'll be in the budget.
Okay.
Councillor Thorkelson.
I just want to comment about the airport ferry, because the airport ferry is a number of things. It's how much how much the wages are and how many trips it makes and how many airplanes it services, but it's also a function of how the ridership at the airport was. When I first came to council in 2005, we ran $1 million annual deficit for the ferries, close to $1 million. And $200,000 is a huge decrease in the deficit between $1 million in 2005 and now. So that's over 9 years, and I think that should be noted. That's due to increased ferry costs and increased ridership, and so we've been trying to reduce that deficit. But I think that should be noted, because that's a huge reduction in an airport ferry deficit. And at one time, Your Worship, I remember, I think you may have been city clerk at that time, we actually ran a profit on the airport ferry.
That's correct. When I operated it, ran a profit.
Oh, I agree. It's just I don't want it to slip under with the loan and everything else. That's all I'm bringing out. I agree that it could be worse.
Yeah, no, it's understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Long.
Yeah, just to be clear, the airport ferry did run an $897,000 deficit projected for this year. So I'm not sure where the $200,000 number came from, but I wished it was that small.
Is there anybody else who wishes to come forward and provide public comment? If not, we'll move on to other items on the agenda. We'll move on to correspondence for action. There's a letter from Ken Franzen, who's a director with Fish and Wildlife, and it's a request for a letter to be sent to the Deputy Minister, Tom Shedden, requesting him to travel to Prince Rupert and meet with the Northwest Fish and Wildlife Conservation Association. Mr. Long, would you outline the requested letter and the reason for that request?
Yes, I believe the organization is concerned about steelhead and the new regulations with respect to steelhead, and so they want to speak directly with Mr. Franzen.
And they're obviously having trouble getting the attention of the Deputy Minister, so they hope to do it with the support of City of Prince Rupert and District of Port Edward. Yes.
I just want to, I'm not sure, and I meant to phone Mr. Franzen today to find out exactly what their concerns were, because at times our concerns have aligned with the concerns of the local fish and game club, and certainly the commercial fishery has been constrained by steelhead issues, and the Minister of Environment, I guess a year ago now, wrote a letter saying that there was no longer a conservation concern with steelhead, that it was in fact an allocation concern between the commercial fleet and the sports guides and I suppose just the mom and pop sports. And so it could be that it wouldn't be to the interest, I don't think, of the city of Prince Rupert to have the Gillnet fleet tied up because of allocation issues with Steelhead. So maybe what could happen is that we could write a letter asking the minister to come and speak with both the commercial sector and the fish and wildlife people about the issue of Steelhead. And it could be that we might even be able to meet at the same meeting if our interests are the same or similar, which is what I would hope.
The letter actually talks about trout, char, steelhead management. So it's a combination of such, but there's no harm in trying to get more groups involved. Councillor Cunningham.
The way I see it is, let's get the minister up here and he can talk to one group or both groups separately. Getting the minister up here to talk is what it's all about. They've already got a letter of support from the District of Port Ed on this situation, and I don't think we're being detrimental to one group or the other by getting the minister here. And if he comes here just to speak to them, I'm quite sure he can speak to the commercial men at the same time.
A motion then, please. Thank you. Councillor Ashley, did you have your hand up?
I was just going to say.
Okay. Can I please have the motion?
That we send a letter to the minister and asking him to come and speak to the vote.
So this would be the deputy minister.
Yes.
Okay. It's been moved by Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Is there any discussion? Comments? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion is adopted. We'll move on to bylaws and development permits. The first one is the zoning amendment bylaw number 3344, 2014. It's a recommendation that council give second reading to the City of Prince Rupert zoning bylaw number 3344, 2014, and schedule a public hearing for 7 p.m. prior to the March 24th, 2014 regular council meeting. Mr. Krekic, would you like to come forward and review the purpose of the public hearing?
Certainly, Your Worship, and very briefly, the Prince Rupert Living Concept has applied to develop 11-unit townhouse project at the end of Graham Avenue. The February 24th meeting, regular council meeting, gave the first reading to the bylaw. I proceeded with public notifications and such, and it's obviously that the next step should be public hearing.
Thank you. I'll ask councils. Mr. Krekic, go ahead.
I was just going to say that the applicant is also distributing a brochure that's going to be distributed throughout the town for your information.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ashley.
So just a question. So 11-unit townhouse. Each unit, what would be the proposed, like how many people, I guess, per unit, or is there?
It talks about 5 2-bedroom units, 6 1-bedroom units, right?
Like, okay, it's on the back of this.
Yeah.
I was looking at our report and it didn't have that.
Even mentions harbor views for all units and 13 covered parking stalls. Sounds like an advertisement.
So in total then, I'm just, maybe if somebody could do the math, I'm just trying to figure out how many people we're talking about living in this complex potentially.
It's got an elevator to all 3 floors. Mr.
That's
Krekic.
great.
There are 11 units, and we do not, in fact, at this stage of the project, although I do take notice of the size of the units, we're primarily concerned about the land use. Of the 11 units, they can accommodate family or single people or individuals, so it would be, the density is very difficult to suggest, but maybe we can say something along the lines of 2.5 people per unit, maybe the density that would be maximum.
I'm just trying to get a sense of having
Certainly, if you'd like to come forward, it is your project. Please make yourself comfortable. Spend a few minutes talking about the project and answering questions from members of council.
Thank you, Council.
If you could please press the button there, people will be able to hear you at home.
Okay, let's look. This is for people like myself who are handicapped, what they call mobile disabilities, and this came about because I wanted to move into something that was much more conducive to my handicap, and looking at property in Prince Rupert, there's not very much left that is of what we call prime viewing. But so we came about looking at this property, and it is such a steep area that we had to look at it at a little higher density than the rest of the community. But what we're looking here is that maximum probably is 2 people, 3 people per place, because this is people living, retiring in their age, like myself, which is close to 70 years old, who want to retire in a sort of nicer way than living in a home. Not for negative on it, but the Cropless Manor is not what we were looking for when we paid all the taxes we had through the years. So if any questions you have, just ask me, and I'll try and answer them.
I see that the contractor is Rupert Wood and Steel.
That is correct.
And you'd like to commence construction in the fall of 2014.
That's a little too fast.
You're reaching, are you?
Yes.
Right.
It's going to take nearly a year to get through the process.
So maybe the summer of 2015.
That's what I predict.
Yeah.
Because we have to have special engineering for the ground area, so that it does. And so whether we have to do pinning or other resourceful ways of stabilizing the building, so it does not have an effect on sliding down the slippery slope of Prince Rupert.
Right. The building developer is the Prince Rupert Living Concepts Incorporated, and Mr. Don Scott is the CEO, and Mr. Kevin Newton, which is yourself, is the project manager. Talks about 11 strata-titled units. Says aging in place design allowing for complete access for those with challenging mobility issues. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us?
They're a high-end. They are, because of the property, it is developed for high-end livers, the people. You have to have, it's for the senior people and the kid that they live in this town, that want to stay in this town and enjoy their grandchildren. And that's where I can see people looking at it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Ashley.
Well, after having gotten some more information about this, I actually have to say that I'm quite in favor of this so far. I mean, it's something that we've talked about as there being a need. We have people aging in the community that want to stay, but maybe don't want to stay in a big house. They'd like to have, something a little different, and this seems to be something that will be needed. So I really like the concept.
It'll be interesting to see how it goes because, of course, one street above, we were reaching to this sort of thing and it wasn't acceptable on the street above. Councillor Thorkelson.
Thank you. Well, I think this might be a little bit different than the street above, but it is a beautiful idea. And one of the things we have in our OCP.
Are you referring to the different neighbors, Councillor Thorkelson?
I'm the different land.
Different land.
Different land. Not a park. I don't think there's any herons around here. So what?
We'll send Mr. Long over the slope there to look for herons. We've always heard how capable he is. Let's put him to work.
Well, I think that we could just put a heron nest right on top of one of those. What I think that this is an excellent idea, and our OCP has talked about densification, and that's one of the things that we need to have a discussion about within our community, about what, how are we going to look at the end if we say in 2 years or 4 years or 6 years we have another, a couple of thousand people or 4,000 people, what is our community going to look like? Are we going to spread out all the way down the highway like one big strip mall, or are we going to all be living in apartment blocks, or what? And then what kind of parks do we want to have? If we're going to have higher densification, I'm not looking at the West End, but if you look at the West End, there's little parks that are tucked all over the place, and then you have Stanley Park, which is right near it. And so what are we going to look at for for our quality of life? And if we want to be small, compact, which is good for walking, it's good for transport. Look at Terrace, how spread out Terrace is, and they have a much more difficult time with their transit than we have with our transit, because our transit is way more compact. So I think that encouraging densification, as long as we're looking after, we had an interesting discussion with BC Housing about densification, and maybe we should have had that discussion before we saw this project, but they talked about something that a developer comes in, wants to put up an expensive apartment unit. And he said that if the city wanted to, they could say, we will allow you to, we will change the zoning and allow more a higher density for that area than is permitted right now, as long as you add to that low cost or units for low cost housing. And then what happens is that they are charged at, is that they were charged at the same charge out rate as, so the same rent or that you're paying, that everybody is paying, because your unit is the same as everybody's unit, but that the provincial government will, through SAFER or through RAP, will top up your what you're paying, so you pay what you can afford to pay according to your income, and then the provincial government will top that up, so you can live in a high quality condominium, or I suppose a high quality apartment with being topped up through RAP or SAFER. And I think that's an excellent concept, for our community if we're looking at development. But we really need to look at this kind of thing, not only for seniors. This is a beautiful project for seniors, but also, for young families and lots of young families. Look at underground around Granville Street, False Creek, right? Lots and lots of people are in that False Creek area. And there's parks all over the place, and how those developments are with a park in the middle, so people can see their kids play. And so I think we need to get some of those kinds of concepts, and where we could put those kinds of developments, so that we have forward planning on how to densify. Otherwise, we're just going to be spread out all over the place, lose the character, I think, of our community, and lose the and lose some of what I consider to be the green amenities of our town, which is being able to walk, being able to ride transit.
Thank you. Mr. Mandrick, the motion.
Your Worship, the zoning amendment bylaw number 3344-2014 reads that Council gives second reading to the City of Prince Rupert zoning amendment bylaw number 3344-2014 and schedule a public hearing for 7 p.m. prior to the March 24th, 2014 regular council meeting.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Thorkelson, seconded by Councillor Kinney. Speaking to the matter, Councillor Ashley.
My only concern with this is and I was a little bit concerned tonight, but I thought we might have more people. But on that night, we also have another opportunity for people to come and comment on budget. I know that there is at least one, if not two, presentations that are going to be made to us that night, because people that from BC Housing were saying that there was people coming. I'm just a little concerned. We're also going to be talking about budget discussions that night. I'm concerned about time, I guess. So one presentation. We never know how long the presentations are going to take, and especially when it's public hearing. I'm just thinking this may not be as controversial as when we were looking at the Westview property, or the, you know which property I'm talking about, but it could be. And if that's the case, we could have a whole bunch of people here, and then we could also have a bunch of people here for the budget. Now, may not turn out that way, but it's always possible. So my only concern is just timing, like whether or not that's going to be a really, really long meeting.
So, based on what you've said, would you like to move? Staff will raise their eyebrows, but what would you like to move? The public hearing or the budget process?
Well, I would.
The budget process is a tough one, and of course we have a proponent that wants to have a public hearing too.
Yes.
But.
My thought process right now is thinking, and I don't know, I want to find out from staff whether or not they think this is a good idea, but I'm almost thinking that it might be good to take the second budget consultation and move it to the next week, because there are some things. We're having a budget workshop tomorrow. We're going to be discussing some issues, and there could be a quite different presentation of the budget that happens next time, and that would mean people would have some opportunity to talk about it after that was presented. And I don't know. I'm just asking. I don't know.
Oh, it's a pretty good suggestion, Mr. Long.
Yeah, I think in this particular case, council is more than appropriate to adjourn a public hearing if in fact you find a lot of people showing up and they want to spend more time. I think you're better off to stick to the dates and start with the public hearing if it is, as I think we could expect. Probably won't take us too long. If it looks like it will, we can adjourn it to another time and place, and that way you can manage the sort of timing, how long these things take, so that if there's 100 people show up, and then obviously you should hear for a while, and then probably adjourn to another time and place. And I think that way we can do both and have enough flexibility there.
Go ahead, Councillor
Okay,
Ashley.
so I agree. Okay, so that sounds good. I guess my other question would be, and it's not totally related to this, but it kind of is, because of what I said with regards to the budget, I guess I'm wondering, is there a possibility that if we feel it's needed, we can have another opportunity for the public to give us some feedback if we feel it's necessary?
Certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cunningham.
Well, I was just thinking, if hypothetically you get 100 people out for this rezoning, and you don't think you got the time, that's inconvenience a hell of a lot of people to adjourn it to another time.
It's a valid point. Councillor Thorkelson.
I sat through meetings on cats and dogs till 11 o'clock at night, and I don't think that anybody is making any good decisions at that time. So I think that if 100 people come, then we need to do what we've done before, is gone to the PAC with the park. I don't see as very much opposition of this. This is not a park. That was what those people were complaining about. This is a private piece of property. It's not city owned. It's city controlled only by zoning, and so I would think that. If we did have 100 people that decided to come here, then we have a bigger issue, and we need to adjourn it and probably research things and make sure that we have a public meeting like we did before, which would be a meeting, not a hearing. Mr. Zenek and
I see what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah.
Councillor Ashley.
So just after all of that, I support the recommendation.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. Question's been called. Those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, that passes, Mr. Mandrick. Next is a report from the city planner. It concerns a development permit application, and this is for the Prince Rupert Courthouse. Recommendation is that council issue development permit number 13-8. Mr. Krekic, would you like to review the reason for this development permit?
Certainly, Your Worship. The consultants for the project and representatives of the owners were visiting my office sometimes in the middle of the last year with a sizable project for the courthouse, and they worked quite diligently within the context of our design guidelines. We do make particular attention to that asset that we have. It's a highly architectural value for the community, and they have they're installing windows that are nearly replicas custom made, and they have satisfied all the requirements of the development permits. Therefore, my recommendation is to proceed.
Thank you. I'll ask Council's consideration. Councillor Ashley.
I'll move the recommendation that Council issue development permit number 13-18.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Kinney. Discussion. Question has been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Next for Council's consideration is the non-motorized wheeled conveyance helmet bylaw number 3343, 2014. Comes the recommendation that Council adopt the said bylaw number 3343, 2014. Councillor Carlick-Pearson.
I'll make the recommendation.
Thank you.
And I'd also like to commend our community members for, as the weather gets better, you start seeing more kids on bikes and skateboards, and I've seen a group of our longboarders, and they were all wearing helmets. So good job, guys.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Discussion? It was quick. Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. It's adopted. Next, we have an additional item, and this is the CN Railway closing the access road to the Exju River campsite. And just as Council discusses this, I'll suggest to the Council, whatever you decide to do, we should in fact inform the Kitimat-Stikine Regional District, because it's actually within, even though Prince Rupert people and others use it, it's within their boundaries. Please go ahead, Councillor Ashley.
Yeah, I had seen some people mentioning that this was going to be happening, or they're looking at it. So I thought it was something we should at least discuss. I know it's not in our area, but a lot of people in Prince Rupert do use that campsite. I know that the MLAs know about it from our region and are working on it, but I thought it would be helpful. What I was looking for is for us to write a letter just asking them to try and work something out, because I believe the issue is, and I could be wrong on this, but I believe the issue is that there is some sort of I'm trying to think of the right word, disagreement or something along those lines between the owners of the property and the Ministry of Forests. I think Coast Tsimshian Resources has the forest license or something, and the Ministry of Forests used to run the campsite, and there's some issues over who maintains the crossing, and CN does not want to be responsible for maintaining the crossing anymore, and so I think they're trying to force the issue by saying, well, we're not going to do it anymore. And so I was wanting to just send a letter of support. I'm going to make that motion that we send a letter just asking them to work together, and because people in our community do like to use that campsite, and I would hate to see it closed.
Okay. There's...
Yeah, I did.
I'll just suggest to you, because there's very few of these areas that people can have access to between Prince Rupert and Terrace, and this is a very nice spot. It'd be a shame, I think, to lose it. So rather than just send a letter, I suggest to you that we ask for a meeting here with the various parties to talk about this, because you hate to see these things slip away.
I'd certainly be willing to add that as a friendly amendment.
Councillor Cunningham.
I'm concerned about this because we're losing a lot of our recreational sites around here. We've lost a lot of the waterfront, Ridley Island. Now, if we lose this as Work Channel next, and there's a lot of uncontrolled crossings on CN, and I made a comment the other day, I don't want to see the CN rail become a new Berlin Wall where our recreational users can't get out into the back country. A lot of people live in this area for that specific reason. And I've had a lot of people come up to me concerned about this because they're just looking down the road. You drive between here and Terrace, and there's a lot of uncontrolled crossings there, and everyone at one time or another takes a quad, a four-wheeler, a snowmobile, or a fishing rod and their kid, and they go up the road and go fishing. And if this could be the start of something we don't want to see, and I think we should try and nip it in the bud right now. And your suggestion of getting all the parties here together is a good one, because it's not just CN, but CN tracks can be used in a lot of different ways. Their property.
Thank you. Mr. Long, have we got a representative from CN Rail that's coming to meet with council in the near future? Well, that's Mr. Mandrick.
Your Worship, there was a representative from CN to attend council's meeting on the March 24th meeting, but that has been canceled and requested to be moved to a later date.
Okay, well, perhaps we could send that representative a copy of this letter along with the other parties. It'd be something we want to discuss. Maybe we can get all the parties together in April to discuss this.
Sure.
So it's been moved and seconded that we get a hold of the various parties who have some degree of responsibility for the Exju River campsite and the rail crossing there, the access, and invite them to a meeting here to discuss our concerns about loss of access to that area by the public. Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion passes.
When is our next community meeting?
Mr. Long?
Is it in June? Or is it that long away? Or the reason I was wondering was I was thinking regarding that presentation we had on I've even forgotten what it's called, but the Northwest Readiness Project.
Yes.
Whether we should, if it was sooner rather than later, if we could invite Mr. Lockmuth.
Yes.
To that meeting to talk to talk to us about the readiness. We would have that. We would have all of those employment statistics, the camp statistics that he talked about. Ready, and it'd be something for us maybe together as a region to talk about what the impacts of LNG would be in our communities. I was wondering if that was something we should refer maybe to, if it's possible, to that C2C.
Councillor, rather than wait for a C2C, this is upon us. It's coming, very prevalent. Mm-hmm. Maybe we should just go ahead and set something up and ask representatives from the communities in the C2C to come and listen and participate with us. I don't think we should wait on this issue.
Sure. I couldn't remember when the next one was. That's why I was
wondering if you'd like to make that a motion,
yes,
please.
I would like to make that a motion, that we invite the C2C communities to meet with us and invite Mr. Lockmuth.
Right, from the
Northwest Readiness Project.
Right.
To meet with us at a time when he said, I think at the end of the month, that they will have the population stats and the camp stats ready to go. And I think that would be most interesting to meet at that time.
So perhaps around the middle of April.
Yeah.
Okay. And of course, it's to discuss possible growth options and the effects of those on all of our communities.
That's correct, and I was thinking, and maybe some strategy to deal with the government. I think it's probably easier to deal with the ministries as a regional district group, for all of our communities in the regional district, and if we have asks, to ask as a region, if we can get that far in that conversation. But it would seem to me to be at least put that on the agenda as well, to discuss a regional approach to requesting provincial government support.
Okay, so we'll include that in the motion, and further to the matter that we put an agenda together to have some discussions on a regional approach and some strategies for going forward to the provincial government. Mr. Mandrick, have you got that in there?
Yes, Your Worship.
It's okay with the mover, and it's okay with the seconder. It was moved by Councillor Thorkelson, seconded by Councillor Carlick-Pearson. I'll ask Council's consideration of the motion. Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion's adopted. Mr. Long, you're next on the agenda. It says report City Manager.
Thank you, Worship. What I wanted to do was just update Council on their strategic priority list, which we worked on now some time ago. The Council's priorities for immediate priorities were Watson Island, major projects preparation, marina plan, and recreation and the recreation center. And I think we've actually accomplished quite a bit in the last couple of months. Basically, recreation is into a new phase. From all accounts, the things are improving, and I think our usership is increasing, and I think we've turned the corner, moving into a positive direction, and with respect to that, so I'm quite pleased with that. I met today with the Port Authority and Community Futures with respect to our marina plan, and we're still moving forward on that, although there's still some clarification as to roles and responsibilities that we need to work out. So that is being worked on. Watson Island, we continue to strive towards our goals with respect to Watson Island, and most of that, which of course must be in camera. And our major projects preparation, I know that Council will look forward to some of the work that the staff has been doing in the readiness section of that. We hope to have a presentation to you sometime later this month where we'll really explain to Council sort of where the staff sees, kind of following up from Mr. Latchmouth's presentation earlier, where we feel the gaps are in our social economic evaluation, and determining where exactly we're going to have our challenges as we move into hyper-economic activity. And I think you'll be pleased. We've done quite a bit of work and a whole bunch of lessons learned from other parts of the world. I think we've now come far enough along where we can actually start to graph some of the things that we expect from other experience, and then start to look at what are some of the solutions, right, from the full gambit of housing, taxation capacity, how to fund our infrastructure deficit, how to deal with the actual increase in population and the shadow population. So I think there's some good things that are going to come out of that work. So that was Council's 4 major priorities, and I think in the 2 months that we've been working on them, we've actually got quite a bit accomplished, and looks like we're moving forward. The next list, or the next set of priorities, was the airport access project. I don't think we've really moved too much ahead on that particular issue. Boundary rationalization, we've done that work. We've completed the process with respect to the piece of city-owned property that we want to bring in our property, or within our boundaries. The CN rail station, I think because that's a property matter, is dealt with in camera, and I think we're moving forward on that. Our infrastructure, which we talked earlier about our infrastructure deficit being articulated in a very precise way as a way to explain where the city is presently and where it needs to go, with just standard growth or no growth, never mind hyper-economic activity. And so I think we're doing well on that. Waterfront plan, we've I think made some good strides forward in terms of working with the port and other members of the community in terms of readying ourselves to get more public access to the waterfront, and really sort of turning the ability of the waterfront to be a particularly positive community asset from just being an industrial access point. And I'm really excited with that, and we'll be able to report on that hopefully within the next couple of months. The regional service delivery model, Council talked about that earlier today. We really need to look at that as one of our strategies to deal with some of this hyper-economic activity. And I think we've dealt with the visitor center issue already in our set of priorities. So I think just to update once every couple of months on the priorities, where we're at, what staff is up to, make sure the council's comfortable that we're keeping these priorities in the front of our minds, and that's really the value of having set priorities, so that the staff and council can not get too sidetracked on peripheral issues, but stay focused ultimately on the priorities you've established. So that's my report, Your Worship.
Thank you. Any questions regarding the city manager's report? Councillor Thorkelson.
I was wondering, we were going to do an asset inventory first, and then have a look at a management plan. How far have we done on that?
We're moving along. It's an item which we budgeted for. We'll talk some more about that during the budget process, but we have actually quite a bit of background information already with a lot of our assets, so there's lots of information. What the next piece is to translate that physical access, valuation, and level of capacity into a plan about what are we going to do where we find ourselves in a challenge? What are we going to do? How are we going to finance it? What are the rules around budgeting for this asset management deficit? And that will come out of some of the work and some of the budgetary allocations to get that work done. So when we're finished, we will know exactly what we've got in the ground, and a lot of that information we already know, but it's rolling that up and then determining how much it'll cost us to replace it, and then how much will it cost us to maintain it over time. And to be frank, we're in the same boat that most municipalities in Canada are in. That is that once we buried the infrastructure, in our case 100 years ago, but in most cases 40 to 50 years ago, we forgot about it. And we didn't really maintain it in the same manner as you and I would maintain our vehicle, change the oil once in a while, etc. We just, as long as it worked, that's what we did. And not to make this a criticism, but this is what everybody in the entire country has done. And we went on with other priorities and really didn't focus on making sure we spent the appropriate amount of money on our underground infrastructure. We're in that same boat. That day of reckoning is coming. It may come a lot faster for Prince Rupert because of some hyper-economic activities, and that will cause the shortcomings to become very apparent very quickly. So the asset management plan will lay all that out for council to really see exactly where we're at, and see a way forward for us to manage that deficit.
Your Worship, that's I just wanted to make sure that Mr. Long remembered about the NDI offer of somebody to do that. That's why I was wondering. I was hoping the answer was going to be no, we hadn't started yet. So we got all that NDI provincial interns, paid interns, available for us to use.
Maybe I could comment on that if you don't mind, Your Worship. We really appreciate some of that, some of those resources. The difficulty is going to be that those kind of resources probably won't help the City of Prince Rupert as much as they will help others, because they won't have the experience and the capability to actually produce the kind of material and the kind of answers that we need right now. But what will maybe be valuable is certainly the help in reading the thick binders and synthesizing them down to something which is readable and doable. I think we'll be calling upon that expertise in this program probably more so than we will with young graduates. No disrespect meant for the young graduates. They're great, wonderful, but in our circumstance, I don't think that's kind of the resources that we really need right at this moment. So, there you go. My report.
Thank you. We'll move on to reports, questions, and inquiries from members of council. Councillor Ashley.
I just have a request. This is a regional district. at our budget meeting on Saturday, we were informed that the regional district was contacted by the office or Ministry of, like, Minister John Rustad, the
Yes.
Aboriginal Affairs. I don't know the full
Aboriginal
title.
Relations, yes.
Okay. And basically, he's coming up, I guess, on March 17th and he's given a time of 11 to 11:45 to meet with the regional district. I know that Councillor Kinney can be there, however, I cannot, and there is an opportunity for someone else on council to go if they so wish. Basically, there was no indication of what the meeting would be about. They weren't coming. They just said, we're here. Would you like to meet with us? So I believe the plan from the regional district is to talk about issues of concern, one of the big ones being BC Ferries and other things that are kind of regional concerns. So if there is somebody that is able to attend that meeting, the opportunity is there.
Well,
That's on March 17th, and it would be from 11 to 11:45 at the regional district office.
Mr. Long, I'd like you to attend that meeting. I can't make it. Take a copy of our report regarding BC Ferries and make sure that Minister Rustad sees that. I'm sure there's a variety of issues that we could talk about, but some should be access and egress, perhaps the Simpson Access Project.
I didn't know if, I'm sure that would be fine. If the member of council wanted to go, that certainly would be an option if somebody wanted to go to that meeting.
Sure, if there's an alternate, it'd probably...
Yeah, like I'm just thinking an alternate because it would be nice, I think, because a lot of people from the Haida Gwaii are probably going to be attending by teleconference. So, if there's people that wanted to.
Certainly.
I believe that technically everybody is an alternate right now, but I may be wrong on that.
No, I think you're correct. Okay. Well, Mr. Long will be there also to provide some continuity and some background information should it be needed. And if there's something in particular you want to discuss and you need some background, please see Mr. Long.
And just so you know, that ferries report, I did give it to staff there as well as to all of the other members on the regional district. So I'm hoping that they were giving that as background as well.
Yeah, we sent it to all the members on the Central and North Coast Ferry Advisory Committee as well as the regional districts. Further reports, questions, and inquiries from members of council. Councillor Cunningham.
Bear with me, I have a few things here. First of all, is our last meeting with the port, there was a discussion about having quarterly meetings with them. I would like I'd like to put forth a resolution that we send a letter to them and set up a schedule so we're meeting with them every 2-3 months. So we get this flow going now that we've got it started. And so we're sitting down and discussing things with them.
First of all, I think it would behoove us to sit down with staff and look at certain critical dates because we don't want to be setting up meetings with people and finding that the North Central LGA is on or the UBCM is on. So we want to be very mindful of our own dates before we approach them.
Granted, but I just think now that we've had the initial meeting and they've put out the...
Okay, so your motion is?
And the a couple of other things.
Make a motion. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
So your motion is that staff come up with some dates so that we can meet with the Prince Rupert Port Authority on a quarterly basis.
Yes.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Is there any discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion has passed. Please go ahead.
Okay, the second one is the SPCA talked to me a little while ago about they have grants available in a program for a feral cat program, neutering and that. And I know we've been around this a few times, but they've got money available, and I'd like to invite them here to discuss it with us at one meeting.
Are they coming to us for money?
That I know of, no. They've got a program available.
Well, let's get some background first, because I can tell you there's some members of council that believe when it comes to budgets that the children in the community come before pets.
Oh, yeah. I agree 100%. I don't know if they're coming for money or not. I was just told they have a program available.
Let's ask staff to get some more information first.
Okay, derelict buildings. We've done a good job of small houses and that, but when you come out of Seal Cove, You have an apartment sitting there all boarded up with a derelict car sitting in front of the doors and hood torn off it. It's the first thing you see when you fly into this town on a seaplane. I would like to instruct staff to talk to the owners of that and see what their intentions with that apartment block is.
Certainly. Would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that staff contact the owners of Seal Cove Apartments and find out what their intention on their front apartment block is and to clean up the area around it.
So it's been moved and seconded. Do you know the street? Is it on Emmanuel Street?
No. This is right beside Solly's.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. Right. It's been moved and seconded. Discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you.
Okay, and third and last is the parking meter at Atlan Dock, or Atlan parking lot across from the port, is wrapped up right now and it says free parking to May 1st.
Yes.
But the one down at Rushbrook is still paid.
The one down at Rushbrook is used as a boat launch.
Yeah, I know, but now you've got local fishermen that can finally even get close to the boat launch, and they're getting ticketed for going out fishing for the day when
the city is charged year-round there for quite some time, whereas over at Atland it was decided by this council that you wouldn't charge there for the winter.
Well, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, no, that's the background on it, but if you'd like more information, you can certainly get it.
Yeah, I would, because I just don't think it's fair for one group and not the other.
Please go ahead, Councillor Thorkelson.
Yeah, I guess that was something that we didn't consider when we made the motion to make sure that the parking lot at the old Atlan freezer plant was going to not charge for those people who are using it, whether they're using it for office parking or whether they're using it to go to shop on a Saturday at the local stores. But I think that is an issue. But last year I didn't know of. I asked around, and I'm not so sure anybody actually got ticketed down at Atlan. And if they're ticketing, if we have somebody who's ticketing now, that is an issue. It's the.
I don't believe anybody's ticketing down at Atland at this point.
No, I mean at Rushbrook.
Okay.
One of the things is commercial guys go down to check on their boats all winter, and they are. Complaining, although the ones I've talked to have never had a ticket, they're complaining that they if they were going to park legally, they were going to have to purchase a pass to go down and check their boats and come up again. And they're saying, what's the difference between somebody who checks their boat for 15 minutes and somebody who parks all day in the parking lot? The person who's checking their boat for 15 minutes has to pay, and the person who's parking all day in the parking lot, who's an office worker, doesn't have to pay. So they're feeling quite put out. But I'm just not sure that anybody is down at Seal Cove ticketing. That's all.
Well, if the council would like to discuss it, let's get a report from staff. You'll get an idea of the Rushbrook float area and the adjacent parking and the reason that was implemented. It was really implemented to upgrade and improve the boat launch and look after some maintenance matters. And actually the money that's generated there is put back there, which is how we were able to put in oil water separators for drainage and to also pave both of those parking lots. But if the council would like to consider it, get a report. Yes.
Well, if that's the case, let's get parking back in the Atlan parking lot and put that money towards Rushbrook improvement too.
I'm just giving you the history of what went on.
Yeah, I know, but it's, you've got one group that goes drinking at the breakers all day or for 2-3 hours. They get free park, and a guy goes down to check his boat, and he's got to park.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just giving you the background. Councillor Ashley.
Yeah, and I do understand, but I guess I look at the things in somewhat of a different fashion. When we went through the parking thing before, and I'm not saying we shouldn't go through it again, it's always good to relook at things. But I know that with the Rushbrook, I know that part of the reason when I was looking at that is again, just like other things, my viewpoint on the airport ferry, for example, should be kind of a user pay. And so if that money is going into making improvements and maintenance, then that saves us as a city to have to pay that. So it's kind of like paying for that. I know that the issue with the Atlan parking that came forward to us was about the businesses down there, not so much about the people that are parking in there for office space, but it was the businesses down there that were feeling it was unfair that they were having people being charged for parking, whereas downtown businesses weren't getting people charged for parking, and there was some feeling of unfairness there, and I know that that was part of it. I'm not saying it's all of it, and I'm not saying we shouldn't look at it, but that's, again, part of the piece.
Thank you. Councillor Thorkelson.
I'm going to move that we ask staff to come up with a report on what's going on at Rushbrook for collection of monies during the same time period that Atlan meter is off.
Okay. I'll second.
It's been moved by Councillor Thorkelson, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion is adopted. Is there anything further? Okay, I'll give the mayor's report. Had a discussion with the Minister of Community, Sport and Culture about the city's top 2 priorities, which are taking into the municipal boundaries the city-owned District Lot 444, which contains the city's source of potable water, and the other item was the removal of chemicals from Watson Island in conjunction with the sale and redevelopment of the site for port-related activities. The minister also spoke of pending liquefied natural gas export opportunities and the ministry's planning initiatives. She also advised that the provincial government would change its legislation to have all municipal governments and regional districts change the term of office for elected representatives from 3 years to a 4-year term of office. I met with representatives from TELUS to provide an overview on anticipated developments on the North Coast. Mayor Dave McDonald of the District of Port Edward was also in attendance, and TELUS will be expanding their business presence in Prince Rupert and Port Edward, as well as expanding their cellular service network. I met with representatives of the British Columbia Ferry Service and the members of the Central and North Coast Ferry Advisory Committee to get an understanding of the planned reduction in ferry service to the Central and North Coast. All ferry service routes are slated to have reductions in service starting this year. The City of Prince Rupert recommended, based on information gathered and contained in a report, that BC Ferries delay the proposed changes and do an economic impact study this year before making any changes. Our concern is that circle tours on the highway corridors to communities that have ferry services are the lifeblood of the tourism across the northern portions of the province. That sudden reduction in service will negatively impact rubber-tired traffic and the hospitality tourism businesses in each community. It will impact, as examples, gas stations, eateries, hotels, campgrounds, bed and breakfasts, museums, heritage villages, from Valemount to Haida Gwaii, from Prince Rupert to 100 Mile House, and again from Port Hardy to Nanaimo. A further concern is for the reduction in the number of ferry trips on Route 10 from Prince Rupert to Port Hardy. That if they cut trips from the months of May to September, you lose a lot of the hospitality tourism opportunities that support the ferry service and generate the greatest revenue opportunities at the most desirable time of the year. We are also very mindful of ferry sailing times on some routes where the scenery is an attraction. Less desirable sailing times changes a tourism package into just a commuter trip if sailing at night. The City of Prince Rupert will be distributing its report to the communities along the highway corridors and routes. And I've already mentioned looking for political support out of concern for the hospitality tourism businesses in our communities. Without the support of communities and businesses, the cost of ferry fares for residents and the average traveler will continue to rise. Our report with a covering letter has also been sent to the communities and regional districts from Haida Gwaii to Valemount, Prince George to 100 Mile House, and Port Hardy to Nanaimo. I've also spoken to radio and television stations in the localized area and also down in the Lower Mainland to garner support. The report is also going to the various tourist associations throughout the regions I've mentioned, along with the Union of BC Municipalities and the North Central Local Government Association. And it's interesting to note that the BC Chamber came out with a very similar recommendation to the one contained in the report from Prince Rupert, and also the Union of BC Municipalities will be coming out with a recommendation perhaps this week or next week. And it's our intention, if necessary, to take it to the North Central Local Government Association and also have some discussions there. Subsequent to the meeting with representatives of BC Ferry Services and the members of the Central and North Coast Ferry Advisory Committee, I then had the opportunity to review the report and its recommendations with the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure. The Minister was receptive to the discussion and was particularly interested in the possible loss of revenue opportunities that reductions in various sailings on Route 10 may create. After discussion, he advised he would have his ministry staff and BC Ferry Services staff review the considerations and that we would hear back from him. I attended the Prince Rupert and District Chamber of Commerce Business Excellence Awards for 2013. The Business of the Year award went to the Crest Hotel, and the Volunteer Organization of the Year award went to the Royal Canadian Marine Search and Rescue Station number 64 in Prince Rupert. I attended the Senior Center Pancake Breakfast for the month of March, and of course those breakfasts are open to the public and are a fundraiser for the Senior Center. I attended along with Councillors Ashley, Cunningham, Kinney, and Thorkelson a meeting with BC Housing representatives, a representative from the Ministry of Natural Gas Development, and a representative of the Northwest Communities Readiness Project to talk about growth projections and possible housing programs based on identifiable community needs. I attended a tour of the Transition House in Prince Rupert and received an overview of the facilities and heard about various programs they provide for those that are transitioning on to a better life and a more positive way of life. The staff also provide some outreach programs to various sectors of our community. I attended the North Coast Literacy Now Steering Committee Celebrating Literacy community event and provided a greeting on behalf of Prince Rupert City Council. The event encourages people of all ages to take up reading. Many different community organizations participated. In particular, the Rotary Club of Prince Rupert funded $500 worth of children's books, and there's a variety of books there which were offered at no charge. Our government of British Columbia has now sold 3 different sized acreages at Grassy Point across Stewman Bay from Lac Ouillams. These properties and the development thereof are under provincial government jurisdiction, which means anything which goes into the air or on the land or into the water will be regulated by the provincial government. With that in mind, I suggest to City Council that we send a letter to the Ministry of the Environment asking when the properties at Grassy Point are being developed, that they establish a Ministry of the Environment office and staff in Prince Rupert. That concludes my report. Councillor Ashley.
I would make that motion.
Thank you very much. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Kenny. Discussion on it? Yes, please go ahead.
I just can't take this opportunity, I'm sure you know, to pass this by to say one of those properties was apparently sold to Enbridge, and that we have to be very careful about northern routes and whether we really want to see Enbridge now move along a pipeline route underneath the water to to Grassy Bay or down across the Nasuga Gulf, which is at the mouth of the Nass River, just puts the Nass River totally at risk. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out as something that we need to be concerned about. Who knows why Enbridge has bought that property, but it really, I found it very appalling, Your Worship, that the BC government, who says that we're not going to have any oil move unless there's a bunch of conditions met, including world-class oil response, which maybe Mr. Cunningham can tell us all about over a beer later, but I don't think we have world-class oil response up here, and I don't think we have a world-class navigational aids in and out of that area. So I would think that we don't have tankers that are not going to spill. So I'd be very concerned. So I'm not suggesting that we not ask the Ministry of Environment to locate its office here. I think that's a grand idea. But I just wanted to make sure that we all know that that property is being sold to Enbridge, and I'm sure it would be interesting as what they plan to do to develop it.
Mr. Mandrick, would you read the motion back, please?
I apologize, Your Worship. I don't have the motion in front of me.
The motion was moved and seconded that a letter be sent to the Ministry of the Environment, pointing out that the provincial government has sold 3 different pieces of acreage at Grassy Point across Stewman Bay from Lac Willam's, that this council is aware that those properties are under provincial jurisdiction. As such, anything that goes into the air, onto the land, or into the water is regulated through the Ministry of the Environment. The question being asked is, when those properties are to be developed, will the provincial government set up a Ministry of the Environment office with staff here in Prince Rupert to regulate those properties? Any discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Just as before we adjourn the meeting, I want to mention one thing. We had a problem, and of course I'm here every day, so I hear about the various operations. We had a problem with an individual down at the Aquatic Center. When I found out about it, I asked that the staff get a thank you card, and I had every member of council sign it. And our staff down there acted in a very professional and a very caring and a very efficient manner to help the person in difficulty. So publicly, I just wanted to say that this council appreciates the work that those employees did. It turns out the person is now fine, but appreciate the efforts and the training and the professionalism that the staff have down there. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Those in favor? Thank you. The motion passes.